Building in a Small Town, where we're talking to entrepreneurs, community leaders, policymakers, and more to find out how they're building things in small towns. I'm your host, Shelby Smith. Hello and welcome back to the Building in a Small Town podcast. Today I am joined by an inventor. This is my first inventor that I've had on the podcast. I have Billie Asmus of Repaint Trays and Repaint Studios. So thank you for venturing down here and joining me today.
I'm super excited to be here because I grew up in a small town and I then moved to a small town and then moved to another small town. So this is perfect.
So well versed in the small town life,
yes,
we would say. Okay, so where did you grow up? You're not a native Iowan, if
No.
I'm mistaken. Okay.
No, I grew up in northern Wisconsin in a tiny town of about 600 people. And that was more of a touristy area. So I grew up on the lake. There was a lot of people that come up and go to their cabins. And I remember having people that would come up to their cabins and be shocked that we lived there full time. And I'm like, you know what? I love it because when you all leave during the week, we get the lake to ourselves. So it wasn't too bad. And then when I met my husband, that's when I moved to Iowa and moved to an even smaller town of about 100 people. And that was puny. And then we lived there for a couple years. And then we moved to another small town. But that one's hopping because it's got stoplights. So we got about like 4,000 people there. So that's where we're at now is we're in Hampton, Iowa. And I love small town life. And I think it's a great place to raise your kids.
Yeah. So where did you meet your husband?
We met on eHarmony.
Oh,
yeah.
It's fine. I met my husband on Bumble, so don't worry.
Yep. No shame.
No shame whatsoever. It's just that's modern dating world for you, right?
Yes.
It all works out. Okay. So were you in Wisconsin at the time or?
Yes, I was living in Madison, actually. I had just graduated college and I moved to Madison to start working and I worked in radio for a little bit. And sales was just not my thing. And it was just really hard. And it was also really hard to meet people in a city, believe it or not. Like that was why I moved there, was to meet more people. And that just it just didn't work out. And so then I joined eHarmony and that's how I met my husband and moved back to a small town.
Yeah, go figure, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so where did you go to school?
I went to a small university called Bethel University in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Okay, and what did you study?
I was communication and marketing.
So that makes sense on the radio gig then.
Yeah.
And so when you say you were in sales, were you like ad sales?
Yeah, I sold airspace for radio and then I helped record a lot of the commercials. So yeah, that was really fun and it was really hard to have to make ads sound very interesting, especially when it's not like a place that you would shop at or, things that you would use. But surprisingly, it's actually really helped when it comes to now recording my own video and my own content and marketing material, because it's hard to do until you go back and watch it or listen to yourself and you're like, yeah, that's terrible. We need to try that again.
Yeah, that was not as compelling when it came out as it was necessarily in my head sort of a situation. So do you think that was the hardest part about the sales thing, was the telling the story, if you will, in a compelling manner, or was it getting people to actually commit to?
I think it was people getting to commit to it was the hard part with the sales. I also was trying to sell a product that I didn't 100% believe in or really love. So having to walk into a business and say, hey, here's why you need radio and to advertise your business on radio. And most of them would say no. And I'd just be like, okay, yep, you know your business better than I do. So then no problem there. And so that's what made sales really hard for me. And so now having my own small business and having to be back in that space and convince people this is why you need to buy my product or check it out or whatever it is. And that's been really hard. But I think the easy part with it is now it's a product that I believe in. And I also understand from a standpoint that it's not always going to be for everyone. And that's okay too. So I realize I'm not going to convince everybody when it comes to my sales tactic or my product. But at the end of the day, I think I'm still grateful for that experience that I had in sales to just, see how I reflect on that and how it's kind of changed how I look at things now in the future.
Do you have a memory of, is there one campaign that you worked on that really sticks out in your mind? If it was particularly fun or funny? I always think mattress stores always have the most ridiculous
They
sort of commercials like that.
Yes, there was a company that I worked with. It was a trailer company, so they sold enclosed trailers, and they had the most hilarious ads. And like, I didn't have to write the ads or come up with them or anything like that. Like those guys, like they were just this small business that sold trailers, and they came up with the most hilarious ads. And I can't even like think of one anymore, but they just were so funny, and they came up with them, and like, you would always stop and want to listen to it on the radio because you're like, oh yeah, that's the trailer guys, because I don't know, they're just so ridiculous, but they were perfect at it because it caught your attention because they were so out there and not your traditional ad that you would hear. And so they were my favorite people to work with because they were just fun and they were like all in about it.
Yeah, I can imagine that if somebody's at least enthusiastic, it makes your job that much easier.
Exactly.
Rather than handing somebody a script and who isn't on radio and doesn't do, typical things like that, being like, I need a little more emotion.
Exactly.
That kind of thing.
That was hard.
Yeah. Oh, I only can think about my husband. If I handed my husband a script and was like, read this ad, and he would just deadpan read it more than likely. And I'd be like, no, that's not. I'm going to need a little more effort out of you, sir. Like you said, to make it compelling, because it's similar in today's advertising world with social media of now the goal is stop the scroll, essentially, getting people to stop and listen to what you had to say. But on the radio, it's what are you going to do to have it not be background noise to like make you stop and listen?
Right, exactly. And I had worked with another guy that he owned like a car body shop. And it was the same thing that you said, like with your husband, where it was just, he had a very monotone voice and he thought he was being very exciting, with the inflection in his voice. And it was not. And we're like, you gotta like give me a little bit more here, man. And it was so hard. But when he would listen back to it, he's like, yeah, that's great. And we're like, perfect. If you like it, then fine. We'll roll with that.
Well, and that would be like the real challenge, I suppose, is because the ad campaigns on radio are not cheap and typically have like a pretty decent size minimum for a small business kind of thing. And so I could see from your angle where you have this and they're happy with it coming out of the studio, but then they get no results. And it's kind of like, duh.
Right. I know. But at the end of the day, I was like, hey, you're paying to do this and I'm okay with that. If you're okay with that, I'm okay with it. So
yeah, I could see that. So how long did you stay with that role? A couple of years or?
No, I was only there for like 9-10 months. And I was there for a long time compared to other people that I had worked with in radio. The turnover rate was horrendous. Like most people were there for like a month to 3 months. And just the managers that we had were not good when it came to leadership. And that was really hard because they would traditionally come out of their office and scream at you and then slam the door and go back in. So there wasn't a lot of direction. The leadership was just not there. So it was really hard to stay in that role. And so for me to be there for 10 months was considered long compared to some of the other people that I worked with.
Well, and then add a layer, was it commission based?
Yes. Majority commission based.
That's the other thing about a role like that is it's very eat what you kill. And you're not exactly, again, it's not something that you necessarily believe in. I wouldn't say that they really probably set you up for success.
No. In
any way, shape, or form. So yeah, of course it makes sense that there's a lot of turnover in a situation like that. Unfortunately.
Yes.
All right. So you only had to stay there for 9 or 10 months. And then did you move at that point or were you sticking around in Madison?
I stuck around for a little bit, and it was kind of right around that time in that job that I just knew I didn't want to be there anymore. And that's when I met my husband. And I was already kind of in the process of moving back to the Twin Cities area just to be closer to some family and just, some of my friends from college. And his family business actually happened to have an opening in my degree, and they were looking for somebody in marketing and advertising. And so they asked if I wanted to apply and interview. And it was the strangest interview I ever had in my entire life because I was dating their son. And I'll never forget, my now mother-in-law had asked me, and she's like, so if you and Holden break up, are you going to quit? And I'm like, well, I don't know. If we break up, are you going to fire me? Like, it goes both ways. And, we just kind of laugh about it now, but
go you though. Yeah. Dang. I'm glad that you struck back with that. Cause I mean, I can see it from both sides, but shoot, imagine being in an interview and somebody's like, oh gosh,
I mean, what else do you ask in that situation? Because I'm like, I mean, I don't know. As long as we're still civil, if something does happen, then, I'd probably stay here. I don't know. So I moved back to Minneapolis, and I kind of worked remotely for them for a little bit until my husband and I got engaged. And then I moved down to that area and started working for them like out of the office full time.
And so that role, you were communications, marketing, that kind of thing?
Yes.
And so for those of you who are listening who don't know, how would you describe their company?
So their company is an agricultural company that works directly with farmers that provide the seed. They provide the seed treatment and the chemical and everything to help a farmer succeed on their farm, really, when it comes to the growing season and harvest season. So that's really what they do. And then they also provide like some consulting as well. So I provided all of the marketing and advertising when it came to that, and did a lot of their website and social media content and whatnot. So working for another small business, and this time in agriculture.
Yeah. So what did that, you didn't grow up like around agriculture up in, northern Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yes. Like, of course,
Different
there is
agriculture
for sure. But like, you didn't grow up on a farm necessarily, like connected to that. Like,
I grew up with chickens, and the closest thing to a John Deere was a lawnmower. So that was my extent of agriculture with what I grew up with. But otherwise, yeah, in northern Wisconsin, we had a lot of dairy farms, and that was about the extent of that.
Sure. So this is a very different world, because I would call it north central, northwest Iowa. Like, that is row crop country.
Yes.
You maybe will see some head of cattle occasionally, but mostly no. Like, it's seas of corn and soybeans, kind of a thing. So a little bit of a different scenery, shall we say. And then I got to imagine what were your main marketing campaigns that you were. Farmers are an interesting beast to market to, as I'm sure you quickly found out.
Yes.
So what were your initial strategies coming in?
I think the toughest thing is I had to think like my grandpa, because the average age of a farmer is like 65 years old. And I guess I shouldn't say grandpa, because now I realize my parents are 65. My grandpa's like in his 90s now. So I guess now I would have to think like my dad. Anyway, so I had to think of like, what are they paying attention to? What do they like to listen to or read? What are the types of information that they're seeking? And also just learning about how they typically buy. And any man, like, this is literally like a study that we covered in college, which is still relevant to today, is they did a whole tracking system that people volunteered for. They put tracking on women and they put tracking on men going into the same store and just tracking how that they buy. And if you look at the tracking system, women would go up and down every single aisle, because they want to browse. They want to see, okay, what's on my list that I might be missing or something. I want to make sure I find it. A man will walk into a store, they go one place, and if they don't see what they're looking for, they leave. And that's literally in and out. And so it's so funny looking at the map of that. And so I had to literally think like a man when it came to these advertising campaigns, and thinking, okay, if a farmer or a man was going to come into this store and ask about something, what's going to be the easiest way to reach them right away without them not leaving the store without finding what they need. So having to think from that aspect was really hard, in just targeting them, because they're not always on social media and reaching them. So it was a lot of the radio and having to reach them that way.
Yeah. AM 540.
Yeah, exactly.
AM 540. I feel like that's a very farmer. A lot of AM radio. That's where, everybody says AM's dead. I would say in farm country, it's definitely not.
Yeah.
I would imagine you had some like direct mail situations.
A lot of direct mail, a lot of like email. It was pretty Facebook and Twitter heavy. But I would say like nowadays, if I were still in that role, I think it would start to be changing a lot more, because when I was in that role, TikTok didn't exist yet. And reels were not a thing. Like, video marketing was just not that big yet, aside from YouTube. And we did do a lot of YouTube, but it was more of the informational, like, oh, this is what you do if you find this type of, bug on your field. But now that there's a lot more of the younger generation that's starting to really come up into the agricultural world, you see a lot more of them on TikTok and on Instagram that they're trying to put more of that information out into the world of agriculture that people are really starting to learn more, which I think is fantastic. So if I were still in that role, I would definitely be taking that same route and trying to reach the younger generations.
Yeah, because there's a big transition that is coming, with a lot of in general, property all over, forget just agriculture. Like there's a big transition coming as our parents start to get older and start, all of that kind of stuff. And It's a lot of things are going to change, I think. That being said, a lot of things will stay the same too.
Yes.
It will still, the younger generations are still listening to AM radio. Like it's still, I don't know if that's ingrained at birth that we do that or it kind of seems like it, but I can imagine you coming into that, not having any exposure and learning it on the fly was its own sort of a beast.
Oh yeah, it was a huge learning curve.
Yeah. So how long then did you stay in that role and stay doing that?
I was there for, I think it was about 3 years, 2.5, 3 years.
Okay. And then what?
So then it was 2020. So it everything was just really fresh, and it was the beginning of all of the pandemic stuff. So 2021. So end of 2020, I had left my job with the family business, and I had always been flipping furniture on the side since I was in high school. It was always fun for me and something that I wanted to do.
And how did you get into that in high school?
So I had a dresser in my room it was white and it had this pink floral stencil on it.
And you loved it.
Loved it. Yes. No, it was in my bedroom since I was a baby. And I remember getting in high school thinking this thing's hideous. This does the whole teenage drama. I was like, this does not fit my style, all this stuff. And I remember asking my mom if I could give my room a makeover, make it something better, and even order new duvet cover or whatever. And she's like, absolutely not. All that stuff is expensive. And I'm like, okay, fine. Well, can I at least paint my furniture? And she's like, yeah, fine. The furniture's already old. And so that was kind of my first take on DIY. And even then, in 2008, nobody was really doing that, or there wasn't I don't even think Pinterest existed yet.
I don't think it did.
Yeah. And so I had no idea what I was doing. Nothing. And so I just went into the hardware store and just bought a can of paint and some spray paint and called it a day. That was the extent of it.
What color did you paint it?
Gray. And then I spray painted the handles black.
How millennial of you.
Right? I know. That's so basic. And it's in my daughter's bedroom now. Isn't that funny? I still have it. And it's still the gray and the black. And someday I really want to flip it again and accurately, do it the right way. But that was my first take on it. And I loved it from that moment on and wanted to kind of keep learning it. And so after I had left the family business in end of 2020, I had started my own small business of refinishing and restoring furniture. And so I was doing that for a bunch of other people. I was trying to, sell some stuff on Facebook Marketplace. We had our daughter in 2019, and so I also kind of wanted to try and stay home with her a little bit more. And so I started doing that, and that ended rather shortly when I came into the idea of my product, and I was not prepared for that.
Okay, so when you were flipping the furniture, did you get into that as a creative outlet? Were you looking for something more creative? You strike me as a very creative person. Was that the draw of being yeah, let's try and make this a business? Give me that kind of.
Yeah. So when my husband and I had moved, the house that we bought was a complete flip. There was orange shade carpet in the bathrooms. There was no lighting. We had to completely redo all the electrical just to have lights because everything was lamps plugged into the outlets. And it was a complete gut flip job. And it had always been on my bucket list since I had been doing furniture and just kind of some small things on the side to flip an entire house. because I really wanted to challenge myself. I really wanted to figure out how to do some more things. And so that's how I really kind of jumped into all of that. And I started flipping a lot of my own furniture and just sharing it on social media. And that's how it turned into a business, is because people asked if I would do something for them, because they had a piece that was handed down to them from their grandparents or whatever, and they just didn't know what to do with it, but they didn't want to get rid of it. And so a lot of times I was restoring it or refinishing it or painting it to something that would fit their decor style. And so that's how it kind of fell into a business. And when I quit my full-time job, I think it just kind of naturally happened, because, you know, my in-laws were also my boss, but they noticed that that was starting to become more of a thing for me. They saw that it was kind of more of an outlet for me, and that I enjoyed doing it. And it gave me the opportunity to stay home with my daughter a lot more. And so, you know, I think they kind of encouraged it too, and were fine with me leaving. So when I kind of just jumped into that full time, it was weird. It was weird working for myself for the first time and being like, okay, I could wake up and I get to decide what my day looks like. And that was so weird and terrifying at the same time.
Why?
I think it was terrifying because I was the one that got to decide what I wanted to do. And somehow I was worried I was going to like screw it up and like disappoint somebody. But I realized like, okay, I'm not going to disappoint anybody but myself. And that's what I have to decide what I'm going to do with my time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's one of those things. Yeah, freedom is amazing with it, but it also can be kind of daunting, especially if you've never done it before, and, you know, putting yourself on your own schedule and making sure that you have the discipline to stay on it, because, you know, at the end of the day, you're right. You get to decide what to do, but also nobody else is going to do it.
Right.
Kind of a deal. So talk to me a little bit about how you figured out pricing when you first started doing those flips. Based on the face you're making, I'm going to say that it was a little bit of a rocky road, potentially. So
it was, yes, it's hard. I think when it just comes to like pricing out, one, what are you worth? But two, you know, what is the value of the piece of furniture that you're flipping, whether it's something that you're flipping to sell yourself or if it's for a client. And a lot of times I would just value it off of like how difficult the piece was and exactly what they were looking for. So a lot of times I just kind of charged hourly for my time, and then would add on additional things that I might have had to purchase for that, you know, that project. And there were some pieces that were really challenging. And I think the tough thing, like looking back on it now, I wish I would have been more open and, you know, had more communication with some clients. I think as a business owner, you might be very gung-ho about taking on any client that you might just get, no matter what that might look like. And I think at the end of the day, I wish I would have told myself like, hey, hone it in a little bit. It's okay to say no to people. Because I had some really challenging pieces that I think I knew were just beyond me, but I was excited to like have the challenge. I always liked the challenge, and, you know, taking on a new client was great because that, to me, that meant business. And at the end of the day, I did end up having like a few clients that, I had to give their furniture back unfinished, and I felt very bad. I felt so guilty about it because I had held on to their furniture for about a year. And it was at the time that I was working on my other business. I was also pregnant with my son, and it just got to be too much. And, you know, I felt very guilty about that. But I think, you know, looking back, I wish I would have been okay with myself, like saying no to some people and just taking on the projects that I knew I could do and do well.
Yeah. And so when you say you had, like, you would get a challenging piece, like what would make a particular, can you give me an example of what would be, what you'd look at now and be like, that girl's got too much work to be done on her. Like, I'm going to skip that one. Can you give me an example?
Yeah, there was a family that their mother had passed away, and so they got a ton of furniture from her. I mean, they pulled up to my house with a trailer full of furniture, and I should have been like, hey, let's not do a trailer, you know? But me, I was like, sweet, a whole trailer of furniture, let's go. The pieces that they dropped off, they were old. They were so old, at least from early 1900s, if not 1800s. And some of them, the fabric was extremely old, like the not knitted, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like the, like crocheted or upholstered, was it?
Yeah, the upholstery, like it was each piece of upholstery that was in that furniture was like handmade.
Oh, like woven,
yes,
essentially. Yeah.
And they were all like the wire spring, type of seating. And some of that was just very old furniture that I did not have expertise in restoring. And those were the pieces that I ended up giving back. And I did help them find somebody who could properly restore them. But some of those pieces, I mean, they were extremely broken or torn or whatever. And I just knew I was not going to be able to like match some of the pieces that were missing or whatever it looked like. And yeah, I don't know why I said yes to that because it was going to be so much work.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, has a pretty wide skill set too, just off of some of the stuff that you described of the different kinds of upholstery and the different kinds of cushions and let's say that there's a leg missing on one of the chairs or something like that. The odds of finding the same species of wood and then attempting, there's just a lot there. That might have been a little ambitious.
Yes, I know.
A little ambitious to say yes to, but I think we've all kind of been guilty of that. I think there's a good portion of entrepreneurship that is figuring out just building the plane while we're flying sort of a situation.
Yes.
That it's fine. We all do it.
Yeah.
It is what it is. It's unfortunate and it's uncomfortable and we hate when it happens because, like you said, we don't, especially as women, we don't like disappointing people.
Yeah.
Like that's just, I don't know. I feel like that's an inherently female thing. But don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It's fine. Water under the bridge at this point. Okay. So you're in this furniture flipping space. You are pregnant with your second already. There's all of these things happening. This furniture flipping thing maybe got a little more out of control than you thought it was going to, which is a gift and a curse.
Yep.
When does the idea for the Repaint Tray really start to come to fruition? Got to imagine there's a toddler involved.
Yes. Yep. So I had my daughter and she was 2. Let's see. Yeah, she was 2 years old. And I was only a month into my furniture flipping business in 2021 when I had the idea for the Repaint Tray. And I was painting every single day, just about. And because I wanted to stay home with my daughter, that meant I had to paint in spurts. And I realized this is just not realistic because I was losing paintbrushes left and right. I was, my rollers were drying out. I didn't have a great way to save my paint when I needed to take care of my daughter when she was waking up from naps. And she also went to daycare part-time, so that way I could have longer spurts of time to work on things. And when I had to set aside my paint to go pick her up, like there was just no real great way to be able to save my paint without having to have paint dry out or my brushes dry out or whatever. And I tried foil, I tried the plastic liners, I tried so many other things, and I'm like, okay, this is just not working. And I'll never forget when I had the idea because I was in our laundry room and I was washing my painting supplies and I looked at my garbage filled with plastic paint tray liners and I'm like, okay, this is not sustainable, this is ridiculous. And so I went to Amazon, I went to Google, and I searched for a reusable paint tray liner because I thought, okay, I'm just going to drop the money on a reusable one and never have to buy another one again because this is driving me crazy. And then I realized this did not exist. I'm like, first of all, how does this not exist? Because it seems way too simple. And then second of all, it freaked me out because it just I was like, okay, here's an opportunity. Do I want to take it? And the rest is history.
Yeah. Okay. So you are your own market at this point, 1,000%. You're like, I don't want to do it this way anymore. There's got to be a solution already existing. You go on the Googles.
Yep.
There's a glaring gap in the market. Do you sit with that for a couple days and think about it? Or what are the next steps then that what do you do?
So when I had the idea, it was kind of like this gung-ho type thing that I'm like, all right, this doesn't exist from what I can see. This does not exist. So I can do something with this. And if it's not out there, then I better start working on this now before somebody else does. So I think I only gave it a few days. I remember talking it over with my husband and I was like, listen, I have this idea. Is this crazy? And he's like, yes, but you can do it. And mind you, my husband, he's so supportive. Like, I'm not kidding when I say I could be a belly dancer full time, and he'd be like, you got this. Like, you're amazing, you know? So he's been so supportive. It doesn't matter what it is. So for me to say this, and he's like, yeah, you can do this. So he had got me in contact with one of his friends who does, he does CAD designs and patent filings for agricultural equipment. And so I'm like, hey man, can you just do a basic search for me on the U.S. patent website and just see if there's anything out there, and you know, maybe you can help me put something together. So he did a search. He wasn't finding anything, and so I went over to his house and we sat in front of the computer and we built a CAD design of it and just tried to get a basic idea of what this was going to look like. And then it was like a week later that I found a silicone shop out of, I think it was like out of Texas, and they provide silicone for Hollywood and to make like prop sets for like fake arms and stuff like for Hollywood. And I just said, hey, I am working on this project. I didn't tell him what it was. I just said, it needs this type of thickness and this type of flexibility. And he's like, yep, you'll need this and this. I'm like, okay. So I ordered $50 worth of silicone. And then I went to Dollar Tree and I bought foam board, and I created my own mold, and I hot glued some plastic liners that I already had. And then I poured silicone over it just to make my own mold to see if this was going to work. And I still have that first liner today, and I could still use it every single day. And I mean, it's in bad shape, but it's still usable. And once I figured out, okay, this thing could actually work and I can use it over and over again. That's basically kind of when the hard work started.
Yeah. So you had a prototype.
Yes.
A very early, very rough, naturally DIY'd. Like that does not shock me one bit in the whole, you know, grand scheme of the whole thing. Okay. So you have this DIY'd prototype. You know it's going to work. You have this rough CAD drawing. Are you at that point thinking, I need to get a patent? I need to get that patent process started now before I talk to manufacturers, or like talk to me about that, because this is a whole world that you don't really know anything about. Yeah. Like you are learning this on the fly. And also in the back of your mind, you have to be like, how has someone not thought of this already? Like I better hurry up. So tell me a little bit about that. Like what's next?
So when I had the idea and I had the CAD design, I had a friend from high school. She had just recently posted about how she got a patent for a product that she was working on. And so I'm like, I'm just going to reach out to her and just ask her, how do you do this?
And what kind of product did she have?
An adult toy.
Okay. Fair enough.
Let's leave it at that.
Well, silicone might be involved in that one too.
Yes, exactly.
Too funny. All right. Yeah. Anyways, it doesn't matter how you get to the process.
She was very open about it. She had posted it on Facebook. And so I was like, you know what? Doesn't matter what the product is, but she's gone through the process. She understands it.
Too funny.
I know.
Sorry.
No,
it's fine. You find experts everywhere.
I know.
And it's one of those things. It doesn't matter what it is. She's been through the process,
exactly.
like you said. So, okay. Sorry. Continue. No. Didn't mean to derail that one.
So I reached out to her and I just asked her, I'm like, how do you even begin this process? Because I've never done this before. I don't know what the cost is. Is it worth it to go through this? And so she got me in contact with a patent attorney, and we filed a provisional patent. So provisional patent gives you 12 months of safety, really, of a window to be able to kind of work out the kinks of your product, figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work, what are the details that you need to put in there. And in the provisional patent, you leave it very vague. You basically have the dimensions, and that's about it. You don't want to say like what the materials you're using, or, you know, necessarily like what it could be entirely made out of or used for. Like we even put in like the provisional patent that it could be made from wood, you know, just very broad things. So that way, if somebody were to stumble upon it, then they don't know really how they could possibly replicate it to maybe steal it and use it. Because a provisional patent is very temporary. It just gives you enough safety and enough of a window to be able to keep working on things. So I quickly filed a provisional patent because 1, I needed to do more testing, and 2, I didn't have enough money to really put towards a non-provisional patent, which can last up to like 20, 25 years.
I was going to say, what's like an average ballpark of getting a real patent? Like, what's the cost, provisional versus full?
Yeah.
I mean, it ranges obviously depending on your lawyer and the fee structure and all of that stuff. But like, do you have a ballpark? Is it usually a range? I imagine you know a little bit about this now.
Yes. Yeah. So a provisional patent can be anywhere from like $250 to $500.
Okay.
And that lasts you a year. The non-provisional patent, like you can depending on the type of patent and what's all in depth with it, anywhere from like $2,500 to $100,000.
Yeah.
And again, it just, like you said, it depends on the type of the product. It depends on the attorney that you're working with, and your attorney is going to have fees, and then the U.S. Patent Office has fees, and there's so many things that are involved. And the way that I tried to save cost on that is I wrote my own patent, essentially, so that way it was less work for my attorney to do, and just said, this is the gist of it. I just need you to read it, revise it so it makes sense from an attorney standpoint and from the U.S. Patent Office standpoint, and then file it. So really the cost for me the first go around was probably around that $2,000 mark for him to read through what I had put together. Otherwise, it was likely going to cost me at least $5,000 for him to put it together. So once that is filed, it can sit in the U.S. Patent Office for at least a year before you even hear back.
Right.
So,
and at that point, you are kind of sitting with no protection either.
exactly.
It's you've jumped through the hoops that you're supposed to jump through, but
right. So I had enough of the provisional patent, because once you file the provisional patent, you get that right away. It's granted right away. So it was enough protection for me to continue to work on it and ask some people some questions without going too in depth about what I was working on. And so I kept my product, the Repaint Tray, I kept it a secret for an entire year. And even though I had the provisional patent, I just still was unsure of the route of how I was going to do this. And so I kept it secret for an entire year. And it was at that point that I ended up going back to school to kind of figure out, okay, how can I put together a decent business plan? Who really is going to be my audience with this? Is there truly going to be a gap in the market? I just needed to understand this from a broader perspective, because the last thing I wanted to do is put in all this time and effort and money into something that nobody wanted to buy. And so going back to school, I think I spent like $300 to enroll in the class for the semester. And
what class was it?
It was like a business venture class through NIAC.
Okay.
So, yeah. And they just teach you to go through all of those things. And then at the end of the class, you have a pitch competition, and you have to pitch your product or your business or whatever it is. And it was at the end of the class that I realized that they announced in the newspaper who was going to be winning or anything like that. And then if you also place in your class's pitch competition, then you are automatically qualify for a larger pitch competition through EntreFest, which is in Iowa City. And so because I had placed in that one, I was automatically going on to pitch at EntreFest, and that was for $10,000.
And was this pitch competition, the very first one that you did, was this your first time like revealing Repaint Tray to the world?
Yes.
Oh, and you inadvertently doing so, I guess.
Exactly.
Okay.
The only reason I brought it to the public and like shared something on social media is because they were going to share about it like in the news and in the papers. And I was like, I would like to be the first one to say something about this. And so I went on live on Instagram, and I just like, hey, like, this is what I'm doing and this is what it is. So if you hear about it, like, that's why. And I was so awkward with my first video. It was so bad. But yeah, that's the only reason I started talking about it. And then people kind of just like followed along with the journey for the last year.
Yeah. Okay. So you place in your first pitch competition, which had you ever like been involved in, been around a pitch competition prior to that? No,
not at all. That was my first experience.
And how long was so for those of you who are unfamiliar with pitch competitions, they can like be very wide ranging in terms of what they cover, how long they are, the style, like the things that you're scored on, like it's a very wide variety. Mm-hmm. And so I have been involved in ones where your pitches a minute and a half all the way up to like your pitch is a full hour. Like it's,
Yeah.
so what was that with first one? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 3 minutes?
With the class that I was a part of, I think we got 7 minutes.
Okay.
And then with EntreFest and that competition, I think it was, either 5 to 7 minutes, somewhere in there. So, and when I went on to EntreFest, so when I was in school, I was pregnant with my son, super pregnant. And then when I went on EntreFest, I was only 4 months postpartum. And I almost didn't go to that because I had my son at home and my daughter. And again, my husband was just like so supportive, and he's like, no, you need to go. Like, if you have the chance to win some money to actually help your business, like, you just need to go and do this. And I was like, okay. So he stayed home with both kids, and he did it all just so I could go and pitch.
And how did it go?
I ended up with 3rd place.
Okay.
So, and I'm still friends with the people that I pitched against and stuff, and we've been very supportive of one another and our businesses.
Yeah. So 3rd place, which was good enough for some funding, right?
Yep.
I'm pretty sure they usually award top 3, don't they?
Yep. And so it was I think it was $5,000.
Okay. Nice, good little chunk
Yep.
of change. But so up until that point, had you really thought about funding options, funding opportunities? Had you really gotten into the really expensive stuff yet? Did you know it was coming? Like, talk to me a little bit about that of, I have this idea, there's this invention, like, I know I need silicone, I know I need some things that are machined. Did you have any concept of how expensive all of that stuff was going to be?
Yes and no. I had spent a majority of my time when I had my provisional patent, even like before I went into school, I was just interviewing people constantly. I just was interviewing manufacturers, other like business advisors, and just trying to get an idea of like, what is this journey even going to look like? Because I don't know how much this is going to cost, where is this going to be manufactured? And the hardest part was that very few people give me the time of day. That was probably the most frustrating part, is one, because I was a no name, I didn't have an established business. I just had an idea, really, other than my very basic prototype. And so for me to approach a manufacturer with this and say, this is what I have, it was a lot of, they would say, well, we get calls like this all the time, and I had another guy, he was like, well, you're not 3M. You're not going to be able to give us $1 million order, so you're not worth our time. And I had another gentleman, I don't even want to call him a gentleman, that like, I called him and I gave him like my whole spiel. And I just said like, this is what I'm working on. I'm patent protected, all this kind of stuff. And he goes, have you looked on Amazon? And I wanted to punch him in the face. I was like, sir, yes, I have looked on Amazon. That was the very first place I went. You think I would file a patent and go through a prototyping and go pitch and go back to school without looking on Amazon? And I don't know. It was really hard. It was really hard that first year trying to gather pricing and figure out what it was going to cost me. And from what I gathered of my information, it was going to cost me anywhere from like $5,000 to $100,000 just for a steel mold, just to make the product. And that's not even including like the raw material. That's not including the shipping. That's not including packaging or any of that. That was just for the mold, just to make the product. Right.
And so as you look at that, then like you have that staring in your face, and don't you love super wide ranges like that where you just can't narrow it down? And so, good luck budgeting for that one. But as you have that staring in your face, are you going, what am I going to do? How am I going to how does that process? What does that look like on your side?
I think when I was kind of still staring down this tunnel of like, what is this going to look like? It somehow didn't scare me for some reason, even with a price of $100,000 mold. I was just thinking like, okay, it's just like another step in the process that I have to figure out how to do it. And that's exactly what I did. And so we had a friend that he's tried to invent some products in the past, and then just some things kind of fell through. But I knew that he had experience kind of in that space. And so I had reached out to him and I just said like, I need your understanding of this. Like, do I do crowdfunding? Do I work with venture capital? Like, do I just try and fund a lot of this stuff myself? And he's like, yeah, there's some different things that you could do, but I have this group. I have a mastermind group. You should come and be a part of it. And you might be able to kind of get some more experience from other people in that group too. So I ended up going to his event and joining his mastermind group. And through that, I was able to find my current business partners to be able to help start the manufacturing process and actually get correct numbers in that whole thing.
Yeah, that's good. Because having a much narrower range, if you will, gives you a better target to shoot for. And it may be completely off by the time you get to the end of it, but it doesn't matter. At least you had something that you were rowing towards rather than a $95,000 spread
Exactly.
of what it potentially could be. Okay, so then you get connected with these business partners. Then what? Are you searching around to get a mold machined? Had you gotten that far yet?
Yeah, so the business partners that I have, that was like a weird story in and of itself. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So when I joined this mastermind group, there was 3 meetups in a year, and I was originally going to go to the one in Iowa because it was closest for me. And then I realized that Kevin Harrington, the original shark from Shark Tank, was going to be at the one in Florida. And I didn't think I was going to make that one because some of the dates that were, just not lining up. Well, as the day got closer, I realized, oh my gosh, I have my dates wrong. I could go to this event. And so it was like 3 days before going to Florida, I booked a ticket and I flew down there and went. And so I was able to have this hot seat with Kevin Harrington because I'm like, okay, he's been in the product world. He understands like bringing something, from scratch into the world. So now's my chance to ask him, what do you do? What would you do with a product like mine? And how would you make this happen? And so I pitched it to him and he thought it was a great idea. And one of the other mastermind members, he kind of piped up and he's like, you should introduce her to the Lockers. And the Lockers are some of his business partners that he personally works with and has connected with other brands. And they happened to be in Florida the same time at a different event for the PGA Golf Tour. And Kevin was like, what are you doing tomorrow? And I'm like, well, I fly out in the afternoon. He's like, all right, we're going to get you in the morning so you can talk to them. And it was just super spur of the moment. He got me into this PGA Golf Tour show. And I don't golf, so I felt super out of place. But the Lockers were there, and back to the pitching. I had to pitch them on a whim. I said, this is my product. This is what I'm working on. This is what I can show you that I have. What do you want to do? And they were super gung-ho about it. They were great. And that's when, things just kind of all of a sudden exploded from there. And they happened to have their manufacturing partner there at the PGA Golf Tour. So I got to talk with him. And he has dual citizenship. So he goes back and forth between China and the United States. And so he does the sourcing and the vetting and everything. And so he was able to find the manufacturing that I'm able to work with. So it's fantastic because he is my eyes and my ears and who he's talking to overseas to making sure that everything is, flawless, so to speak, in the process.
Gotcha. Okay. So that business partner relationship then did you end up giving them an equity piece to become involved?
Yes.
Okay.
So they do have a small portion of equity, but there was no capital that was involved. And so most of it is for their resources and, they help manage all the manufacturing and the shipping, logistics, fulfillment and everything like that. So that is a huge weight off of my shoulders that I don't have to manage. For sure.
Yeah, definitely. And the dual citizenship piece and being able to be over there and boots on the ground, that is
massive.
Totally worth it.
Yeah.
Totally worth the small piece of equity. I think I would do the same in your shoes. Okay, so you get hooked up with these guys. So then do things start really accelerating in terms of getting the mold machined, all of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So then they were able to get me some proper quotes on what it was going to cost. And then we started an official prototype aside from what I did because I was never able to actually properly mold a lid. That was the tough part with, just doing home prototyping. So they put together an official prototype for me, which cost me I think it was about $6,000 for one prototype. And then from there, we figured out the pricing. We had to figure out the thickness of the liner, the thickness of the tray, how heavy it was going to be, how thick the lid was going to be, all these types of things that we needed to adjust to make sure that it was going to work properly. And I believe the steel tooling for the mold itself was about $35,000, and which was significantly less than $100,000. And so I was okay with that. And then when it came to my first round of inventory, it cost me about another $65,000.
Right. Just to get product landed to then hope that somebody buys, essentially.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay. So at that point, Are you going, I need to be looking at maybe some pitch competitions?
Yeah.
Did you go like the crowdfunding route? Did you do pre-orders? Like what did you do to try and like alleviate that initial like situation?
Yeah, I did so many different things. I think originally I was like, I'm not going to get rid of equity. I'm going to try and hold on to my business for as long as I can. And I still hold 90% of my business, which I'm very happy with. But yes, I did a lot of pitch competitions. I tried to do a lot of those. I started to kind of get burnt out with them because some of them can be a lot of work. It can be months in the process of the application before you are actually pitching in front of judges. And you're not guaranteed anything. You're up against a lot of other businesses. And
sometimes the judges are just painful.
Yeah, so she was one of my judges.
I was one of her judges.
Thank you for picking me.
Yes, no problem. I think you got second in that one. First. Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if you got second or first. But that was the Young Entrepreneurs Conference.
Yeah.
2022, maybe 2020, or maybe it was last year.
I think it was last year. It was
last year because
I think it was a year ago, February.
Yeah, about a year.
This time.
Yes, because I had not painted this place yet, and I just remember when you were, because somebody had asked like what your target market was, and I'm on your judging panel, and I turned to them and I said, I am her target market.
Yes, I was so excited when I heard that you were going to be on the panel. I'm not going to lie, because as you were giving your speech about your business and the crickets and everything, and you're like, oh yeah, we almost got selected for HGTV and we're working on flipping. And then I heard you're on the panel. I'm like, yep. She will get it. She understands.
Yes, there will be no need to explain this to her.
Yes.
And you didn't need to. I was 1,000%. That's why I was just like, I am her target market. I don't know what you were talking about. So yes, so you got into the pitch competitions. You did that. And then what else did you do? I could see where you could get burnt out of those very quickly.
It takes a lot of time.
It does.
I sold a lot of stuff on Facebook Marketplace and still doing that.
When you say a lot of stuff, you mean like furniture and things like
so I still had a lot of my own inventory from my furniture flipping. And so I ended up selling a lot of that stuff. Just some things that we had in our house that we weren't using, I would sell out on Facebook Marketplace. And I did end up taking out and using my retirement fund. And I think that was really scary because, you don't want to use your backup. And I think when I got further into the process and I realized I need this money to actually make something happen, I realized, okay, this is real. This is super real because it's not just pitch money here and there. Like, this is a good chunk of money that I'm pulling out that is kind of my fail safe, and I'm draining it. And that was scary. And I remember calling the guy that was, holding the funds. And he's like, you know what? I'm proud of you. He's like, usually I advise against people pulling out retirement funds, but I always say if you're investing in something, you should invest in yourself. And he's like, I think this is a good investment. And I was like, awesome. Okay, thanks, Rod. I appreciate that. So yeah, there was a lot of other things that I tried to do to just make it happen along the way.
You were just scrapping at that point.
Still am scrapping.
Yeah, aren't we all? Amen to that one. Okay, so you get enough monies together between all of the different things that you're doing to get this initial manufacturing run going. Mm-hmm. When you got your prototype that cost you $6,000 for your first tray, yep. Was it what you wanted?
No, it wasn't. But I knew it wasn't going to be the final product because the prototype that we had was also made from another 3D mold. So it was never going to be identical to what the actual product was. But at the end of the day, it worked the way I needed it to work, and it was the general idea of what I needed it to do. And so really the only way to really know what the final product was going to look like was to actually start that steel tooling. And that's when I started doing a lot of the pre-order funds to try and get people to purchase ahead of time. And the scary thing with that is we don't know what the timeline is going to look like. We have no idea when we're actually going to have product here and available to sell. What if something happens and this isn't actually going to work? And so having to do the pre-order funds saying like, hey, please give me your money and we'll get you a product someday. Don't know when, but we'll get it there. And I had a lot of people pissed at me. I had so many people that would message me like months later that they're like, hey, I ordered this. Where is it? And I'm like, still working on that. Yeah. And I think that was the big misconception, is that when you're bringing a product to the market that is completely from scratch, people don't realize that you have to make the thing to make the product. So like I had to make the tooling and the mold to actually make the product, because this hasn't existed before until today.
Right. So how long then, speaking of that, did it take you to go from your prototype that you had that was conceptually down the right path, but was not quite there? How long did it take you to go from that to what we have sitting in front of us today?
The steel molding, I think it took about like 60 to 90 days just to do the steel tooling. And then after that is done, then they send me a sample. So that takes like an additional 2 weeks to get it there. Well, when we got the first sample, it was not what we wanted. And that was hard, is because the type of silicone was different. It was way too rigid. It was not flexible enough. And that was the problem. And that I started freaking out, because I was like, all right, I just poured in all of this money into a steel mold. A steel mold is not reversible. So if something is wrong, then that's investing in another steel mold, which is going to cost me another $35,000. So I'm like, what can we do to adjust this without having to do a new mold? And then I'm set back, another 3 months. And so it was playing around with the silicone consistency and the different types of materials that we could use to actually make it work. And so I had to be sent like 3 or 4 more samples before I was like, okay, yep, this is actually going to work. And from there, that's when they actually started the manufacturing process. And then it took another 2 months before I was able to finally get the full set of inventory here.
So it took a while.
Yes.
That's okay. Rome was not built in a day.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about like the branding of the actual tray. Like, yes, making the steel mold, all of the actual engineering that goes into it. We've kind of dabbled with that
Yeah.
You were starting from scratch on that one and have learned so much about it. And you should be really proud of all that you've built with that. But talk to me about like your vision for the actual brand. Like, what did you, I assume you chose like colors. Did you design your own logo?
Yeah.
How did that go?
So, well, because my background is marketing and advertising and did a lot of like graphic design stuff myself, I knew from like day one that I wanted to call it the Repaint Tray, because I'm like, okay, what's a paint tray? But it's reusable and recyclable and all this type of stuff. So I'm like, okay, so instead of just paint tray, it's Repaint Tray. And that was the extent of that. And so I contacted my patent attorney and was like, let's get a trademark on this. And he's like, okay. And that's how we kind of got started with that. And the logo I designed myself, and I even put like my own personal signature on each lid. And that was my business partner's idea. They thought like, oh, it should be like the George Foreman grills. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, George Foreman grills. The guy put his signature on all of them. And I'm like, you're right. So they told me to put my signature on my paint trays, and I was like, okay, yeah, we can do that.
That was a good idea.
Yeah.
Oh, George Foreman girls.
Yeah.
Dorm rooms everywhere. Everybody, I was gonna say, it seems like early, late 2000s, early like 2010s, everybody had a George Foreman. That's what you...
I had one.
Yeah, same thing. Actually, I think when we moved, we just threw out our like one that we had for a long time. I was like, it's time. It's time to let this one go.
I can afford a real grill now.
Yes, it's time to let this one go. Okay, so then tell me about how you got involved with Lowe's.
Yeah, that was a pitch competition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing is I ended up getting an ad from them. I kept seeing ads for it on Instagram for this.
Well done, marketing team.
Right? I know. And I was like, target audience right there. And so I kept getting the ad on my personal Instagram page aside from my business one. And I was like, what is this? Like, what pitch competition is this? And so when I actually looked it up, and that it was for new products, that they were looking to bring in new products into Lowe's. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to apply for this. And I remember like sitting and thinking on it for a little bit, because I'm thinking, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for this. My product isn't even here yet. Like, I don't actually have anything on the market. Would I even qualify for something like this? And I almost didn't apply, but I had so many other people getting ads for it too that were in the DIY space that they had sent me links to it, screenshots, and they're like, you need to apply for this today. And I'm like, okay, everybody else is saying I need to apply for it, then sure. And so I went through the application process. I took a wild guess on when my product would actually be here, because that was the stipulation, is like you actually had to have product. And I'm like, I don't, but we're going to just make something happen here. And when I went through that application process, I mean, it was extensive. I had to submit a video. I had to submit this whole ordeal. I had to like sign up for this account for all this other stuff. I had to find all this information that I'm like, I didn't even know this existed in the product world, but okay, I have to find it. And I submitted it, and then I just waited. And I'll never forget when I actually got accepted to go to the in-person pitch competition, because I had bought my first lottery ticket. I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy a lottery ticket today. I'm feeling a little bit lucky. We're going to see what happens. And that evening was when they were going to announce who was winning the lottery. And my husband was putting our daughter to bed, and I bolted into my daughter's room, and I was like, I got it. And my husband jumped out of her bed, and he's like, what? You won the lottery? And I was like, no, not even close. But I did get in with Lowe's. And he's like, oh, okay, so another lottery. And I'm like, yes. And it was such a wild experience, because it just hit me like a ton of bricks that I'm like, okay, somebody sees something in my product that's in the massive retail space. And this is a global pitch competition. So for me to stand out on paper in a short video out of the entire world who is submitting the same application was just a surreal feeling and a surreal experience to be able to see that, okay, they want to actually see this in person.
Yeah. Okay. So you get that acceptance email. I'm sure bedtime went real well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe had to try that one again.
Yes.
Okay. So you get this email, ironically, the same day that you buy a lottery ticket,
yes.
Of course. Then what? Like, how long between getting that email acceptance to I have to have my pitch ready, I have to have my product landed, all of these things? How long did you have for a turnaround time? And did you have a date yet? Okay.
No,
nope.
I didn't. I think I got about 2 months. And so it's funny, I had texted my business partner before I had even told my husband that I had made it into Lowe's. And I was like, hey man, you're coming with me because I don't know what I'm doing. And he's like, all right. And he immediately contacted our guy overseas and just said, like, we need to put a rush on this now. And so he was able to crank out like 5 trays right away and get them sent to me. So I had something to bring to Lowe's. And, we were just like, yep, they're going to be landing any day now. When in reality, we probably had no idea yet when it was actually going to be here. And so when we get to the Lowe's in-person pitch competition, first of all, just preparing for it in general, I had no idea, because it was so different from any other pitch competition I've been a part of. All the other pitches, you're competing against so many other people in various different industries and businesses and products that you're having to talk about your audience and, what is the opportunity here and all these other things. Whereas Lowe's was looking for something very specific. What is your cost structure? What is your fulfillment like? Where are you shipping? Who are you fulfilling to right now? They want to know all of that type of stuff, as well as part of your story. They want to know who you are as a person. And so I had to completely restructure what my pitch actually looked like to fit what they were looking for. And the way that Lowe's have it set up is that it's like a golden ticket opportunity type thing, like Willy Wonka. And when you get there, basically you pitch to a first round of judges in a small room, and then they get to decide whether or not they want to push you forward. And you would either get a blue ticket or a white ticket. And the blue ticket was you would go on to pitch to potentially be on Lowe's shelves, and a white ticket would just be to be on Lowes.com. And before I went to that first initial pitch, they have like a vendor fair, and you get to talk with other departments in Lowe's. You get to understand, what does it look like to display a product? What is it for sustainability when it comes to packaging? And so I walked in and I just was starting to ask questions, and all the other inventors and businesses that were there were very like black tie, suit, black pants, black shoes, like super formal, hiding their products. Nobody wanted to show off their product at all. And here I had walked in with my paint sweater shoes. I had like bright green pants and like this loud blazer on with like big dangly earrings. And I was like, okay, I got to dress the part. Like I got to come in here and actually like show off my brand. And I'm like, what is the point of hiding my product? Like this is already out here. It's on its way. So I'm just going to bring it out here because people are asking like, what are you working on? And as soon as I brought up my product, people in this vendor fair in Lowe's were just like, what is that? And just like, whew, like they all just like circled in, and it was such a surreal experience that they're like, I want to know what that is. Like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And so before I went to that first pitch, there was already like this chatter happening between Lowe's executives, and they were like texting other Lowe's people saying like, you got to watch out for this one and watch out for this one. And so going into that first pitch with the panel of like 6 judges, they had already, I think, figured out who I was, and they were like excited to hear what I had to say. So then the stakes were even higher, because I'm like, okay, now they have this expectation of who I am and what my product is, and now I have to impress you. And after that pitch, they're like, all right, I think this would be a good product to be in stores. So they gave me that blue ticket, and that meant I was going to go on to the next round. And that was wild.
Yeah. Okay. So that's funny.
That was a lot.
But I can 1,000%. I know exactly what you're talking about when you go into a vendor fair or conference and everybody's like in this stuffy, like dressed in a really stuffy way. When I was in banking, I was the you with like the loud, like I had pants that looked like wallpaper. They were like, and that was what I wore. I wasn't gonna wear these like stuffy black suit. That's just not me.
Exactly.
And so it's not like, it's just not gonna happen. So I very much appreciate what you did, and I think you did the right thing, obviously, for you. If Lowe's wasn't gonna be cool with that, Lowe's wasn't the right fit for you.
Right.
And like accepting that, I mean, I know that's like hard for some people to maybe be all right with. But long term, it would not have been a good relationship had you had to hide yourself, feel like you hid yourself, sort of a thing. Okay, so you make it on to the next round. Then what?
Yeah. So they handed me the blue ticket to go pitch in person. And I was like, sweet, I have a little bit of time to like debrief with my partner and just go over my pitch again. And I looked at the time that they wrote down on the ticket, and I looked up and I saw that they were escorting me to my next pitch right away. Like I didn't have any chance to even like open my laptop. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, like I just got it. This is game time. And I walked into the next room, and this guy was already looking at my website when I walked in. And luckily it was just one guy, so it wasn't like a massive panel of people. But he was looking at my website, and I'm like, okay, again, he had to have heard about me from somebody else because he was already researching me. And he's like, oh yeah, I was just looking at your website and stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so you already know who I am. And pulled out my pitch and did the whole spiel. And he was kind of shaking his head, and I could tell he was, thinking about it. And then just so casually, he was like, yeah, I think we're going to put in some orders. And like, it didn't even faze me, because I was still in this pitch mode and selling mode, because I went there with the full expectation that I was not leaving until I had a purchase order. I'm like, I'm not going to fly all the way here to North Carolina to walk away with nothing. And so when he was like, yeah, I think we're done here. And I was like, oh my gosh, I thought like I was literally going to leave with nothing. And I looked at my business partner, Mike, and I was like, Mike, what do I do? And he's like, no, we're done, as in they're putting in orders. And I was like, oh, thank God. Okay. And he's like, let's get a picture. Oh my gosh. It was such a weird experience, and so casually. And he's like, can you come back at 3:00? Like, yeah, okay. What's at 3:00? And he's like, well, maybe have some more details for you then on what this is going to look like. And so we, go back to the vendor fair, and the people that I had talked to before were just like super pumped when they saw that I got my gold ticket, and they're like, oh my gosh, you're going to be in Lowe's stores. Like, this is awesome. And everybody there, like a part of Lowe's, was fantastic. They were so kind and like so supportive, and they didn't even know who I was. So I go back at 3:00, and there was one other business there. And that's when I realized that we were the last 2 people that had actually were in the final for the paint department. And I thought, okay, either they're going to announce who the winner is, or they're going to make us pitch against each other. Like, I was not prepared for what I needed to do. And all of a sudden, like, this huge group of Lowe's executives come into this room, and they started with the other business and said, like, we like your product. You're going to be in this many stores. And then he like turned and looked at me, and he goes, but Billie, I just really think that there's something there with your repaint tray, and I'm really excited about it. So I think we're going to put in a $100,000 purchase order, and we'd like to put you in all of our stores across America. And I was just like, what? Like, what did you just say? And I remember my partner, Mike, looking at me, and he's like, this doesn't happen. This never happens in the retail world. And he's like, I swear we're being punked right now. This is not real. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so surreal. And then it's just like from there, just things have just kind of like exponentially exploded.
Yeah. Okay. God, it's such a good story. So awesome. I already told you congratulations, but congratulations.
Thank you.
I know it's been such a long road. There's been so many bumps in the road, like you said, from day one, figuring out, who do I even talk to? Where do I even start? Is this even a good idea? All of those things, to culminate to get that validation from a very large, very well connected, very well established retailer to be like, no, what you built is legit and so legit that we want it literally everywhere.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You should be super proud. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
It's so amazing. So, okay. So you get this purchase order. It's done then, right? You're on all the shelves in Lowe's.
Not
and
yet.
It's super easy and life's been great.
Oh my gosh. No, now it's just like, now it's the tough part, because now I'm entering another space that I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I'm constantly having to learn and figure out, how do I navigate this? And just learning the acronyms for everything is just like, what does this mean? And then I have to pull out my sheet, and I'm like, what does this mean? And then not only is there acronyms for just the retail space, but Lowe's has their own set of acronyms. And I'm like, I don't understand. It's just trying to figure that all out and doing all the onboarding and making sure that everything is taken care of. And, in the meantime, between December when I had pitched up until, February, we were still unsure when my product was actually going to land. And our launch date was set for February 1st. And I was like, I actually don't even know when my product is going to be here, but I was still shouting on the rooftops, like, February 1st is launch day. Let's go, people. And I'm inside internally freaking out. I don't even have product here in my warehouse. What am I going to do? And, I was just telling Lowe's, yo, we got inventory. And literally the day of launch, I'm not kidding, February 1st, the truck has pulled up to the warehouse. Everybody is frantically pulling out paint trays and then unpackaging them and repackaging them and shipping them out to the hundreds of people that have pre-ordered. And then we're like, hey, by the way, we now have product. It's good to go. And I have never been so stressed in my entire life, is just waiting for that product to come in and telling people that it was actually in, even though it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, and it's so much, this kind of goes back to your sales thing. So much of it is managing expectations. And, you can only for so long keep sort of kicking the can down the road of being like, it's coming. I promise. It's going to be here. Just trust me, sort of situation. And that, and all of the other things I don't envy you to have been in that situation, shall we say. But you are now officially launched. You do officially have product. That first run, will that cover your Lowe's?
Part of it.
Okay.
We'll see. And that's where a lot of the funding comes in and stuff, is now I'm at this point that if I want to grow and if I want to scale, then I will need venture capital. And I think for so long I had this idea that I'm going to hold on to a majority of my business and I'm going to make it happen by myself. And I realized that's just not the case with some companies anymore, that sometimes you just have to take on that outside funding. So I am right in the middle of working on an investment deal, which is really exciting. But also, again, another set of challenges that I have to figure out and navigate, because my background is not finance. I don't understand the investment world. And so having to really learn that and understand it, and also just trust other people's experience and expertise, and that they're giving me sound advice, that's also really scary. So trying to understand that and have this all fall into place while managing the onboarding things with Lowe's, it's a lot that's falling into place, but it's all exciting things at the same time. So with Lowe's, we're hopeful that the inventory that we have right now, that'll help cover some of the things that are going to be launched on Lowes.com. And then likely sometime later this year, we'll be actually on the shelves in Lowe's.
So to be determined.
To be
on
determined
all of that
still.
kind of stuff,
Not going to give you a launch date.
Yeah. There's some lessons that you end up learning the hard way.
Yeah.
And you figure out how to craft your language accordingly, shall we say, moving forward. That's okay. Again, I also kind of like the pricing thing. Like we all kind of go through that where we screw it up. We also all kind of go through the getting burned by making promises that maybe we can't deliver on, that there's ways to do it as you move forward. And you really do have to learn that one the hard way too. So what has it been like building all of these things, doing all of these things, going through this whole process, and still like being a mom and managing that whole side of things? Because that's not easy either.
No.
And just, you left the family business because, you had your little business that you were building on that side that ended up birthing this additional child that you have. But, part of that was you wanted to stay home, with your daughter at the time and your son, and then you go on this wild adventure. So what's it been like managing that too?
It's been hard, to say the least, because when I had started all this, I was still staying home with my son. My daughter was in preschool at the time, so she was in preschool part-time. And I was still just trying to manage it all. And I realized that if I really wanted to take this business somewhere and make it something, that I wasn't going to be able to do both. And so it was then that I kind of had to choose. And I remember putting my son in daycare, and I just cried every day because the adjustment period was just not good. He was not sleeping. He wasn't adjusting well to daycare. He actually ended up getting an infection in his eyes because he was rubbing his eyes and crying so much. And I just felt like such a terrible mom.
Poor buddy.
I know, I felt so awful. And now things are fantastic. We love our daycare provider. He loves going there. And so does our daughter. It's great. But that adjustment period was super hard. And just trying to still figure out what I was going to do. And plus we're, a one income household. So we also had to figure out how are we going to make this work with 2 kids in daycare, on one income. And, because we're just trusting and hoping that this business is going to work out and help us actually have another paycheck someday in the future. But being a mom and trying to balance business is hard. I mean, I think anybody that's a parent can probably relate, because regardless of whether or not you have your own business, kids get sick. You have to drop everything that you're doing and take them to the doctor or keep them at home. It doesn't matter what it is. And so just being able to have to adjust to that is really hard. And that's actually been really hard, being able to find investors and partners, because they realize I have little kids at home. And I actually had a business advisor tell me, you shouldn't mention that you're a mom when talking to investors. And needless to say, that was the last conversation I had with him, because I was like, dude, if I don't mention that and then they later find out that I'm a mom, what is that going to do? And if they don't want me to be a mom, then they're not the partner that I want to work with. So when I found my business partners and they saw that I had a family and everything, they were excited about that, because they also have kids. They love the family life. They think it's important. They understand the need of needing to take time off to take care of kids. And it's just, I'm very appreciative of that people understand that. And that's something that I for sure want to implement in my company, as I grow with employees and other clients and whatnot, is just making sure that that family aspect comes first and foremost, and that business is always going to come second. It's okay if shit hits the fan, we'll get it taken care of, but your kids are what's going to be most important, and they're the ones that matter in all of this.
Yeah. I am sorry that someone said that to you. I am glad that you did not have another conversation with that person.
Yeah.
I think that I would have had smoke coming out of my ears if someone said that to me or implied that even. So I'm sorry that happened to you, but you handled it well, like I said, by cutting off that relationship entirely. It's not easy to balance and do what you do. But I think your kids are probably very proud of, what you felt. And although they may not completely comprehend it, it's going to be one of those things one day that you can be like, yeah, look, I did build this. And, if you're in the same situation, you can too. Don't ever a family's not limiting for
Yeah.
you. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
So what are you really excited about in the next 12 months?
I think the biggest thing is just being able to like really get this thing off the ground and running and being available in stores. I mean, it's awesome that I'm fulfilling product now. Like that's exciting. And every time I see an order come through, I'm just like, yes, you know, like that's amazing just to see. And then also seeing the reviews now. That I think I was holding my breath for the most when I released my product. Is like, oh my gosh, I have been the biggest fraud. You know, that's what I'm saying to myself, the biggest fraud over the last however many years, saying this is a great product and everybody's going to hate it. And thank God that's not the case. I've had a lot of fantastic reviews of people saying like, this is great. It saves me so much time. I can save my paint. And so I'm excited to just like see that grow even more just over the next year. And I'm really hopeful to land this investment deal. So that way, you know, I get the funding I need to be able to hire some help for sure, because I'm already getting to the point that like, I can't manage this all on my own anymore. And it's exciting, but freaky, because then it's like, oh, great. Now I am somebody's boss. Like I have to be a leader. I have to take care of these things. People are looking to me for advice, and I have to be the one that makes the decision and have the responsibility of day-to-day tasks. So there's a lot of big things I'm excited for, a lot of scary things, but I figured, okay, if I've made it this far and I can figure it out, you know, like there's nothing I can't do at this point.
Yeah, man, it has been a long road,
Yes.
my friend, just to even get you, you know, to this point, like you said, where you have inventory and you see those orders come in and you're like, yes, I can fulfill that, and do all of that. So I have a feeling this is going to be a very big year for you. And it will come with its own growing pains.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that's as every big leap you take, it doesn't matter. No matter how big you get, the problems are still there. They're just different and or bigger.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to say that it's going to be a non-bumpy road for you, but I think that it is going to be a very big year for you.
Yeah.
So I am very excited to watch you grow through all of it, because I think there's big things on the horizon for sure. But so if people are interested in following along with this as it evolves, if they want to get their hands on this awesome new product that fresh off the press, essentially at this point still, the Repaint Tray, where should they go to, you know, maybe be able to purchase? Maybe they're interested in getting on your cap table one day, being an investor, that kind of thing. Where should they go?
So you can go to the website. It's just repaintstudios.com, and there you can now order, not pre-order. You can order your paint tray and it'll show up a few days later. Otherwise, social media, you can check us out on Instagram. That's where we're the most is it's just repaint_tray. And you'll see a lot more of our silly videos and stuff there.
Yes. Also TikTok,
the Repaint Lady. Yeah. I try to be more active there.
All of the places. It's fine.
Yes.
We can't be everywhere at once.
I know.
And so I think if you just pick Instagram as your platform, just go with it. Mm-hmm. Don't listen to everybody else telling you need to be all the places all the time. Like, it's just not possible.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to sit down with me and have this conversation. Like I said, super proud of the stuff that you've built, and I hope that you are really proud of how far it's all come. I know it probably seems like it just was one thing after another and such a long road, but it's worth it. You're off and running, man. So congratulations. I think it's awesome. But thank you for sitting down and talking with me.
Of course.
Yeah.